Welcome to Truth and Liberty. Thank you for joining our daily live call-in broadcast, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to the issues, and you can call in and get your questions answered in real time. According to the Bible, it's the truth you know that sets you free. So call in today to get answers, information, and resources to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and the world. And now here's your host, Richard Harris.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of the Truth and Liberty Show. I'm Richard Harris, your host today. I'm so glad you're joining us. Very excited about today's program. Man, there is a lot to talk about, isn't there? Can you remember 3 weeks in the news with more amazing stuff happening, significant events, some good, some bad. What a time it's been over the last 3 weeks, and I'm super excited to be able to discuss some of this stuff with you today with my special guest, Chad Connelly. And I'm going to introduce Chad in just a second, but before I do that, let me remind you guys that the Truth and Liberty Conference is coming up September the 12th through the 14th, and we encourage you guys to register and come on out. It is going to be an amazing time. Did you know that Ben Carson is going to be speaking at the conference on Friday night, along with Rick Green? Bill Federer is going to be with us, as well as some other amazing speakers, including, of course, Andrew Womack and Marjorie Dannenfelser, who's the head of SBA List, Susan B. Anthony List, the largest pro-life organization in the world. She's one of these people who behind the scenes is literally responsible for so much good and so much change. And we're going to have 40 different exhibitors, 40 plus workshops that will equip you. So come on out to Woodland Park, Charis Bible College campus, and join us for the Truth and Liberty Conference. Again, it's September 12th through the 14th. The conference is free. If you want meals, you'll need to pay for that, but it's going to be an amazing time to recharge, refire, and equip you to stand for truth. So make it out for that. Also, just around the corner, August 6th through the 9th is the Healing is Here conference. This is a place, I'm telling you, Healing is Here is a place of miracle power, and I'm not exaggerating it. Every year at this conference, there are dozens and dozens of people that receive divine healing in their bodies. You won't want to miss it. Andrew is going to minister, Audrey Mack, Carrie Pickett, Barry Bennett, who was healed of stage 4 cancer, Daniel Amstutz, Butch and Julian Hartman, Carly Teradez, and Richard Roberts, the son of the great Oral Roberts, is going to be ministering as well. So come on out for that. All right, guys. Well, my guest today is our good friend, strategic partner, and world changer, Chad Connelly. Chad is a veteran of the United States Army, serving as an officer as an armor officer. He was the South Carolina Republican Party chairman, and he did such an amazing job in that state that he got hired by the Republican Party to be the national director of faith engagement. And since that time, Chad has ministered in more than probably 100,000 churches across America, knows more pastors than anybody I have ever met. He is literally at the top of the chain in terms of influencing the church to turn out and make a difference in our culture. And Chad's organization is called Faith Wins. We're going to talk about that more. And I'm just super excited to have you on the show today, Chad. Thank you so much for joining us.
Richard, I am honored, brother. I had such a great time with you guys in Woodland Park, and awesome conference a few weeks ago, and beautiful setting. Brother Andrew, all you got, your whole team, they were just amazing. Dana and I loved it, and it was a good respite from all this travel, brother.
Well, thanks, Chad. It was awesome. I can't believe that we're already into late July. That was July 4th, and man, you brought an amazing word. And, you know, it was great. We're so blessed to be here. It feels like an oasis of truth, you know what I mean? So we love it. But it was awesome having you out here. And, you know, when you were here, stuff was developing on the ground at that time about the Republican National Convention that was going to be the next week. And I remember you were talking about shenanigans that were going on with regard to the party platform and stuff. So we're going to get into all that today. But before we do, tell me about Faith Wins and what's on tap for this year and what you guys are doing, and, you know, maybe how people can be a part and support you in it.
Sure, sure. Well, look, Faith Wins came out of really 30 years of God putting on my heart that we as Christians are to be salt and light. And Richard, as you know, and Brother Andrew knows, there's no comma when Jesus says, go be salt and light. There's no comma, well, except in the political world. And so really for the last 15 years, since being chairman and all that, I've dedicated my life to just getting Christians involved in the political arena, in the public arena, in every aspect. And while elections are important and everything we care about is at stake in them, honestly, it's about Christians doing their part, Richard. And so Faith Wins for the last 7 years, when I left the RNC as the first ever National Director of Faith Engagement, we've been dedicated to registering and engaging Christians across the spectrum. And we don't tell them who to vote for or how to vote, but we do talk about voting biblical values. And let's face it, brother, our nation needs a dose of that at every level. And it's not just about presidential or congressional, gubernatorial, senatorial. Man, we push them to get involved at the city, county, state level too. And so faithwins.org has all that information for people. We love to have people come to our meetings. I think I was on my team call yesterday. We have 108 slots where we're doing pastor meetings, small and large, between now and the election to get Christians to do just that.
That's awesome. And so, folks, if you're watching today and you're not registered to vote, or maybe folks in your family or your church aren't registered, you ought to go to Chad's website. What's the address there, Chad?
Yeah, it's faithwins.org, F-A-I-T-H, faithwins, W-I-N-S.org. And we have all the information, Richard, in every state. Absolutely register, get your friends, get your church. And Richard, we even have instructions on how to help your pastor walk through it from other pastors who've done voter registration and stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, so Chad, let's talk about the Republican National Convention that you were present at and a delegate to the convention, I think from South Carolina, right? And
that's right.
So, I didn't get to watch all of it, but a lot of the parts that I watched were really great. I mean, everybody on the ground was saying it was a fantastic, motivational, emotional even convention. Of course, it came right on the heels of their attempt to take Donald Trump out, the attempted assassination. What was it like at the convention? Can you just comment on that?
Absolutely. It was the most exhilarating, inspirational one I've been to. I've been at conventions since '04. I was an alternate first, then I was a delegate, then I was state party chairman, then I was senior staffer for the Republican National Committee in '16, got to work behind the scenes, and I was a delegate. Of course, we didn't have one in 2020, and I was elected delegate again this time. Richard, it was awesome. I mean, the floor was energetic. President Trump came all 4 nights. He was up close and personal with people. Of course, his family was there, and it was like a who's who of the conservative movement on the floor. Richard Petty, the NASCAR driver, came by. Of course, all the Fox News personalities who were stopping in the hall and getting pictures with people, and then everybody's favorite congressmen and women and senators, governors, they were everywhere. Of course, MSNBC and CNN were there too, but I didn't notice a lot of people getting pictures with all their personalities. But man, it was exhilarating. And I got to tell you, if people did not see the tribute to the Gold Star families, it makes me emotional now. There wasn't a dry eye in the South Carolina delegation. I wasn't like looking around. But man, that was powerful. And even the dedication to the fraternity brothers at North Carolina who protected the flag. I want to tell people, go back and watch that. It'll make you feel great about America. It'll make you feel great about the next generation. And it'll remind you that freedom's not free. And when the Biden administration says they haven't lost a soldier in Afghanistan, and they gloss over those 13 precious lives that were abandoned, and we heard from those mamas and daddies, oh my gosh, Richard, Dana and I were we were weeping. It was emotional. I just thought that whoever planned that part did a tremendous job of honoring our fallen soldiers.
Something just hit me. We got a lot to talk about, but I just want to say this. Something just hit me, which is the Republicans and for the most part, when they're being true to who we are, their message makes you thankful and proud to be an American. The Democrats, their engine makes you upset about America, makes you think America's a bad place and ashamed to be American. And that's kind of a litmus test, we could use that more if we think about it in those terms. Just an observation. What do you think about that?
No, you're right. Although I'll bet you in August, and speaking as Chad Connelly, individual citizen here, I think you're going to see a pro-America. They're going to try to look like moderates. I think you're going to see a huge makeover for Kamala Harris, and to make her likable and pithy and smart and clever and all that stuff. And I'll bet you they're going to push down. I mean, on television today, we're watching an insurrection by the pro-Hamas people. That's the left. That's today's Democrats. I'm reading from my notes on an Israel messaging group I'm on Signal that literally the pro-Hamas people released maggots into the Watergate Hotel, where the Israeli delegation with Benjamin Netanyahu standing. I don't know if this is out in the news right now, but I've seen pictures. So it's another security failure. But you're absolutely right. The left today has lost their minds, and they are kowtowing to their far left progressive base instead of being centrist. But I'll bet you're going to see a pro-America demonstration like no other, worthy of the best thing Hollywood's ever produced in August at the Democrat National Convention.
Yeah, well, they're going to try to reinvent Kamala, but I think that I think their choice to coronate her is probably. They could have done a lot better, in my opinion, because now they've got someone who can't escape the Biden White House, can't escape everything Joe Biden did, failed to do, the disaster of the last 4 years. And what about her own failure to, be honest with the American people about his declining condition? And even today, she's trying to have it both ways. I think they've got some real liabilities, don't you?
Oh, my goodness. I've told the media, I've probably done, 25 or 30 national interviews in the last month. And I got to tell you, I didn't have an assassination attempt on my bingo card. I didn't have a president dropping out after the primaries on my bingo card. That hasn't happened since, I think, Franklin Pierce. LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, decided not to run in 1968, but the primaries weren't finished when that happened. You got to go way back to the early 1800s to find a time to duplicate what the Democrats just pulled. And yes, I think every conservative in America ought to hang the Democratic record on Kamala Harris's neck. The failure at the border, the indecision. In fact, this week she snubbed Benjamin Netanyahu's address to the United States Congress. What an affront. And that's our greatest ally in the world, probably, but certainly in the Middle East. And to have the sitting vice president, and who knows about the president, I don't guess he could sit there for that time, but to have the sitting vice president and the eventual nominee of one party to snub that, and she's an officer of the Senate as the United States, as the vice president anyway. It's an amazing time to be alive. It's amazing God tapped us on the shoulder. But, honestly, Richard, everything you summarized and that I just described, that's why we talk to our people and pastors about issues. You always got to go back to issues. It's always bothered me that consultants, the media, whoever, label, it's a Biden thing or a Trump thing, or they talk about a candidate, or, do that at any level. I think we ought to, as Christians, ought to look at issues. And when we look at issues, the left is wrong on everything. And look, you and I know sinners we're all sinners. There's no degree of that, right? We're sinners, but some are saved and some are striving and some are trying and some are doing all they can to push the envelope. And the left has embraced the craziest set of values that I've ever seen. They're not virtues, they're values. And I think that our side ought to hang it on their necks because these issues do not connect with the American people.
Well, and that's a great segue into talking about the new Republican platform, Chad. It's not exactly, doesn't draw in a lot of viewers to talk about the platform. It's kind of a dry subject, but it is so important because people need to understand this is where if Donald Trump is elected, this is where the country's headed, right? Is the Republican platform, especially this time, because it looks to us like he wrote the thing. And it looks more to me like a campaign speech than it does a traditional platform. You were originally on the platform committee and got forced out. I want to hear about that. But first, can we just start with sort of just a general overall, the new Republican Party platform adopted at the convention. What's your take on it?
You know, from a political person, been around a long time, I do see it as a campaign set of campaign promises, a campaign statement. It looks like what you would see traditionally on the website. Here's what we stand for. Here's what we believe in. I don't think about it in terms of traditional platform. And, you know, President Trump kept his word. He made there was a board in the White House that was much talked about. Promises made, promises kept. So I believe he'll keep his word to that stuff. He was absolutely the most pro-life president in American history, showed up at the March for Life, appointed 3 justices that were confirmed to the United States Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. I mean, goodness, Richard, I don't know how long you've been involved in the conservative movement, but that's been a prayer my entire life. And so I want to see those things. I want to step on the gas. From a political standpoint, I see their point of not wanting to step on the gas and just go win and go do and execute the things that they know is best. From a platform standpoint, somebody who's a traditionalist and a conservative, a Christian first, I like to see a platform that fully fleshes all that stuff out. But, you know, this is not new, and it's not just this administration kind of thing. At my first convention in 2004, one of the conversations among the delegates and alternates was the consultants trying to water down the platform. We saw it again in 2008. We saw it again in 12. We saw it again in 16. It's been an ongoing thing. In 16, we won, and I don't know about you, but I think that was the most pro-family, pro-life, pro-conservative movement platform in modern political history. And I was willing to and I said it in my delegation meeting when I ran for platform and got elected by my fellow delegates, I would sign the document right now with a new date on it and call it a day. Clearly, there's been a move on to streamline that and make it more readable. I'm for that. I think that's smart. I agree that people don't read that stuff. But, you know, you and I work with people that are pastors that aren't going to say, go endorse this candidate. I can't tell you how many times I've told campaign staffs, I just don't know many pastors, priests, rabbis, anybody that has a church they're leading that will endorse a candidate at any level. It's rare. And they all assume, well, they got to endorse. My own pastor went back and forth 7 times with a presidential campaign staffer this year. Well, you got to endorse, and we won't use your church name. And look what other pastors, after my pastor said, I just don't do that. And I've got the text exchange. And I've used that with campaigns to try to explain to them they don't endorse. What they do use, Richard, and I know you guys have, are the platforms. Yep. Look at this. Now, we can still stand on that as Christians, and there's no comparison. The left wants to sexualize children. They want to have grown men scantily clad dancing in front of 4-year-olds. They want to have pornographic filth in the libraries. They want to have gender mutilation, sexual reassignment. Men and women's sports, you know, go down the line, abortion on demand. I think Kamala Harris is probably the most pro-abort candidate in all of American history. She's going to make Biden look like almost a conservative comparatively. So we can still compare those things, but there's no question it created some angst among the conservative movement. I think you'll see a reset among the pro-life groups. We'll press in at the state level, and we'll keep on pressing in to make sure people at every level, campaign, et cetera, consultants, media, and et cetera, know that the Christian vote matters, and you got to pay attention to it.
So thank you, Chad. That's phenomenal. Well, the platform is a whole lot easier to read than the old version. It's condensed, it's organized in a kind of a, not bullet point, but, you know, a nice little outline and all of that. And it's got, in my opinion, it's got a lot of good in it. But let's talk about the abortion issue first, just so people are clear. But the old platform that you're talking about from 2016 and 2020 was really strong. And basically, I mean, I've got a quote here in my notes, but it's probably a little bit too long to read. But it basically says The 14th Amendment guarantee of life, liberty, and property for every American applies to children in the womb. And, and they have an unalienable right to life. And then it went on to list, we're against late term, we're against partial birth abortion, we're against funding of Planned Parenthood, we believe in appointing pro-life judges, and many other specific policy things. Super strong. And the and I'm just going to call this Trump's consultants platform. Trump's platform here. It says basically, I don't know if you'd say it waters it down, but it does condense it, and it says that we stand for families and life. We believe the 14th Amendment of the Constitution guarantees no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that therefore the states are free to pass laws protecting those rights. Well, they skip right over the federal government and punt the ball to the states. Now, Trump has been saying that for a while now, but they really are saying federal government's not going to get involved in this, except it goes on to say after 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states. So they're interpreting Dobbs as saying the states are the only ones that can regulate abortion. That is actually not true. Dobbs does not say that. If it's a civil right under the United States Constitution, then the federal government can protect that right. But they say we oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. And so that last part sounds a little bit like a Democrat talking. But what's overall, this is it really narrows down what Trump is willing to do on the issue of abortion.
Yeah, I think the condensation is good. I think the readability is much, much better. I don't think that this changed anybody's mind. We are a pro-life party. The people on the floor are pro-life. I think you're going to see that reestablished. I think they were looking for, and let's face it, consultants are always looking for the pithy, right? The talking points. And I believe with all my heart, I've said this publicly to consultants, their inability or unwillingness to message on life makes them want to avoid the issue. Right? That's it.
Right.
And it's easy for a consultant who makes a ton of money, they make money win or lose, to say, well, it was that reason or this fault of why we lost. The truth is, when you look at all the governors that passed strong pro-life language, they got reelected overwhelmingly, and it brought people out. And so I think it's a skirting of the issue in the consulting class. I think the intention of watering down or condensing or shortening, abbreviating, word I'm looking for, of the platform is probably a really smart thing. People read. It didn't change any mind inside that convention. I can tell you that. And I can also say that the effort by consultants to avoid the issue will fall flat. And because the left is not going to let you avoid it. I mean, look at what Vance said, and certainly Franklin Graham's sermon he gave the gospel at the convention, talked about it. J.D. Vance is out there. Our people are solidly pro-life, up and down the tickets. Congressional, gubernatorial, senatorial candidates are going to talk about life in positive manners. But the very next day, there were billboards against the pro-life position in Milwaukee. So for all the effort, we're going to avoid the issue. They're never going to be able to avoid the issue. What's amazing to me, and I've told this to consultants for years, you guys are choosing to sit on the fence, where you're going to get splinters in your rear end, and you're going to get fire from both sides. I'd rather stand where I stand as a Christian first, a conservative, happen to be a Republican kind of thing, and I'm going to continue to stand on those biblical issues, and I think Christians should too. What I believe is everything we care about is at stake this year. It is a big deal, and when you look up and down, it's going to be clear where people of faith need to be voting.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think if Trump is reelected, which I think he stands a good chance of winning, but do you think he is going to appoint the same kind of judges in his second term that he appointed in his first term?
I do. I've been part of some groups that have been vetting judges. I'm no expert in that, but I've been invited in some rooms, and they have given the campaign and the administration teams lists of judges they've already approved, much like what they did in 2015, 2016. I think you'll see the same kind of response. I really do. They're going to see constitutionalists. If we get people who are committed to the rule of law up and down, the judges, and let's face it, the lawfare that the Trump folks have seen and he personally seen is going to make them want to have judges that are constitutionally bent, not activist judges. I think that's going to take care of itself, quite honestly. I really do.
Yeah. Well, and there's a whole lot of other stuff in the new platform that I think is really strong. You know, Chad, I was really struck by what the platform says about freedom of religion. Did you have a chance to notice that part?
Yeah, I read it too, and I'm like you. I think there's some places in there that give us amazing contrast to the left. I don't think we have to apologize for any of that stuff, and I'm going to stay on that condensation. Abbreviations, fine. I'm going to focus on those high points, and I'm going to point people to issues right along the way because, like I said, the left's gone loony, Richard. Yeah. There'd be very, very, very little. Now they're going to try to pull scripture and they're going to say all kind of positive stuff. But I think as an individual citizen sitting here looking at it as a Christian, you know, really trying to be biblically minded and read my Bible, then you'll see a lot of people take things out of context and try to apply them to progressive ideals. And they're just not. They're conservative ideals. They're Christian ideals. They're biblical. And you can go down the line: life, marriage, Israel, religious freedom. Religious freedom's a big one. Because it is something we speak toward, and it goes back to those judges too, Richard. Conservative constitutional judges are going to protect religious liberty, not infringe upon it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I know you've been saying this. We've been saying it on Truth and Liberty for years here that, you know, the Marxists and the LGBT radicals, they are not going to be happy until they have controlled the pulpits, until they are telling pastors, you cannot say that LGBT is wrong, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, and that's the end game for them. So, you know, if we're talking about should pastors and churches be excited about this new platform? Well, I'm disappointed a little bit on the life issue, but this language on freedom of religion is powerful. They say here that every person has the right not only to worship according to the dictates of conscience, but also to act in accordance with those beliefs, not just in places of worship, but in everyday life. You see, we see Christians running into this radical LGBT agenda everywhere, and they're trying to silence us. And this specifically says, no, we're not going to put up with that. And he wants to establish a federal task force fighting anti-Christian bias. Well, that sounds awesome to me. What do you think?
That's right. You know, what it tells me, Richard, my wife's got a saying, we shouldn't be surprised when non-believers act like non-believers. And, you know, what it tells me, our teams in our C3, we've registered a little over 2 million new Christian voters the last couple cycles. And it tells me we got to register 10 million. I see the shortcomings because the parties aren't Christian, right? They're going to attract people that are going to be comprising what they're made of and whatnot. But for us as Christians, we're not going to be part of a party. We're going to be part of issues we care deeply about. We know that Jesus isn't running. And I told my team, hey, this tells me that we got a lot of work to do. We've got to influence the media, the consultants, the campaigns, the candidates, and we got to keep showing them the Christian vote cannot be taken for granted. And for me, I believe what it tells me is what we've been trying to prove. We access people because of pastors and relationships that the consultants and that crowd can never access. And that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming up now on a break here, Chad, and folks, as you're watching Truth and Liberty Show with my good friend and special guest, Chad Connelly. So we're going to take a break for about 90 seconds to share some important announcements with you, and then we'll be right back after that. We've got a whole lot more great stuff to talk about, so don't go away. We'll be right back in about 1 minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes. All right, we'll see you in a bit. Hey, you know, a big part of what we do here at Truth and Liberty is to provide you with the resources that you need in order to stand for truth in the public square. So I want to remind everybody to go to our website and check out our resources page at truthandliberty.net/resources, where you can find material that discusses just about every issue we're facing today in our culture. And these are things that are prepared by our strategic partners and some of the most influential and important organizations in America today. At Truth and Liberty Coalition, we have big plans to make a big impact. If you want to be a part of turning our nation back to God, I want to invite you to become a supporter of Truth and Liberty. You can go on our website at truthandliberty.net to the donate page and make a gift there. And you can also sign up to make a recurring automatic gift of $5 or more per month, and then you'll become a Truth and Liberty member. And our gifts to Truth and Liberty are not tax deductible, but I promise you, God sees your generosity. So go to Truth and Liberty and become a member today.
With practical government, you have experts in the fields that are sharing their perspective, wisdom, and experience. It's not available anywhere else in the world.
We're going to teach a Christian heritage of our American government. They're going to learn about the Founding Fathers. We're teaching the Constitution, how government operates, practical skills, and field study.
No matter where you're coming from, the world needs you.
Whatever God's calling you to do, you're able to do it.
To learn more, visit practicalgovernmentschool.com.
All right, welcome back to the Truth and Liberty Show. I'm Richard Harris with my guest, Chad Connelly, who is the president of Faith Wins and just one of the great culture warriors on the Christian conservative movement today. Chad, before the break, we were talking about this new Republican Party platform, and before we move on, we've got to talk about what Trump says about schools and education. You know, I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, I've seen this quote, that the philosophy of the classroom in this generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next. And, you know, over the weekend, I think, or maybe just the last 2 days, I saw Randy Weingarten, the head of the NEA, and another big-time teachers union lady, both just going off the rails in some kind of unhinged rant, and they seem to do that all the time now, where they're yelling and screaming and throwing their hands around and pounding on the podium. I'm sure if they read this, which they're probably aware of it, they must be really upset and worried about Trump being reelected.
No doubt about it. I saw that rant. I don't know what it is about that lady. She cannot have a conversation or speak in front of a podium without just sounding shrill and screaming and pounding the podium itself. I don't know, man. They've had such a monopoly from the NEA, the National Education Association. They've had such a monopoly on schools. And what is it? They've got probably 80% of the kids in public schools, 85, in a government school. Christian schools, private schools, homeschooling make up less than 20%. But they don't want competition. But you know what? It's like everybody on the left, and let's face it, it's the secular world as well, Richard. They don't want to hear about Jesus. Our friend Bob McEwen says, you can go to the local community college and they can say, Richard Harris, come in and pray. And now what are you going to pray about? Oh, if you pray in goat's breath or eagle's feathers or the wind, they go, ooh, that's wonderful. We'd like to know more about your faith. But if you say, I'm going to pray in the name of Jesus, all hell breaks loose because truth reveals error. And so I think that's what you're seeing with the NEA. Is when a President Trump, if he really got in and had time to do the agenda he planned in a second term, now he's had 4 years to think about it. He's been planning. He's been going, what would make America better? And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with the leader of America making America first. I think if I was in Zimbabwe, I think we ought to be in Zimbabwe first. We need to make our country better for the most amount of people. And America's blessed more people. It's helped more people go from one place to another, and education is a key. And when we give parents freedom, man, I love these initiatives in these states where the dollars follow the kid instead of going to a bureaucracy and to an administration that just sucks up a bunch of money. The dollars ought to go to the classroom. They ought to follow the kid, and that's what President Trump's talking about doing. Yeah,
and it's amazing. We started off, you and me here, just talking about can Christians get behind this? And the kids in our nation right now are being totally indoctrinated in Marxist, ungodly, LGBT, racist philosophies, and Trump is going to undo that, at least to the extent he can, according to this platform. It specifically says he's going to restore parental rights, end woke indoctrination, including CRT and radical gender ideology, no boys playing in girls' sports, focus on academics. He's going to restore the 1776 curriculum, teaching kids how they can be proud of America and about our founding principles. I just think, man, that is awesome. I couldn't have hardly written that better myself. Talking about championing the First Amendment right to pray and read the Bible in school. So, I think as believers, we can all get excited about that. So, even though abortion didn't get handled the way we would like in every way, there's a whole lot to be excited about in this new platform.
Oh, no doubt. I think that education part was as concise and strong, as we say in South Carolina, that was strong onions. And anybody who believes in freedom and Christian schools and the freedom to read the Bible and pray, they ought to be going, wow, it's something to highlight and talk about. And let's face it, that monopoly that the education establishments had on children and on teaching. I don't know if you saw the interview with Elon Musk. He is going after the woke mind virus. So he's in line. And let's face it, the vice presidential candidate, nominee, J.D. Vance, that's what we had a private meeting with pastors with him when he was running for Senate. We met with all the candidates. I think we had 26 or 27 Ohio pastors there that day. And that was a big part of what he talked about, was how this wokeism is destroying kids and their thinking and destroying the culture of the country.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Obviously, JD, you like him, but I mean, do you think that was a wise choice by Trump? How's that going? How's his selection there going to influence the campaign and the outcome of the race, in your opinion?
Well, we got an incredible bench on the right. It's an incredible bench, and the number of people and the talent, the skill sets he had to choose from. I don't pretend to know the thinking, but I'll tell you this: J.D. Vance is very good on his feet. I was looking forward to him taking the bark off of Kamala personally as just an American citizen and in a debate, but he's very good on his feet. And you got to think that's something that President Trump was considering when he selected J.D. Vance as running mate, was his ability to think, his ability to articulate what he believes in, and his absolute commitment to the American First policies.
Yeah, well, I was thinking maybe he would go with, a black person or a woman or something like that and help draw in those votes, but he went with another white male. And I hate identity politics, but do you think that was effective? Is that going to affect him badly, or are people even going to care?
I don't think so. I mean, the left has wound themselves in this box, all centered on identity politics. I've told a bunch of media that I was going to enjoy watching them get out of the box. And we've already seen the first steps of that, right? Is they had to put Kamala Harris there. And like you kicked off with, now they're going to hang all those policies and the failures of the Biden administration around her neck. They are all about identity politics. You know what's going to be fun to watch is they've spent years now, every white man is a white supremacist. So if they're smart, they're going to put a white governor there who attracts some of those middle-of-the-road voters. And how are they going to get out of that? They built that box. Racism's far worse because all they do is talk about it and highlight it and ask people how you've been affected by it. I grew up in small town South Carolina. Nobody told me that's a purple guy, that's a white guy, that's a polka dot girl. I just wasn't part of our upbringing. They dealt with it years ago, I guess, and just they lived together as human beings. And the leftism that focuses on all the differences is right out of Marxism, right out of cultural Marxism, is trying to make oppressors and oppressed. So they got to get themselves out of this box, and you're going to watch the media go all in. But if I had to pick right now, I bet they're going to pick a white guy who's either a senator or a governor to be Kamala Harris's running mate, to soften her a little bit with the middle of the road voter. And it's not about white or black to me. It's about policies.
Absolutely.
It's about what they stand for and what they believe in. And that's what we talk about in our ministry too. But as a person, as a Christian, as a conservative, I'm looking for policies that most closely align with a biblical worldview. And there's very little on the left that does.
Well, Chad, I mentioned earlier that when you were here for the 4th of July, the stuff was unfolding, shenanigans on the platform committee, and that's I think it goes beyond shenanigans. What I know and have heard about it from you and others, including David Barton, it's kind of shocking and offensive, really, and in my opinion, alarming that Republicans would follow tactics like that. It sounded a whole lot more like what Democrats would do in a power move. But can you comment on and explain to the folks, to our viewers, what exactly happened? Yeah, I know you were forced off the committee, but can you explain it in more detail?
And it's weedy. It's a lot of inside baseball, probably water under the bridge. But the short version is it looks like consultants worked in 25 states to make sure that there were yes people on the committees, and they weren't going to have a big drawn out discussion on anything. They had their platform or campaign set of promises. I think the female representative from South Carolina, who is a friend of mine, LaDonna Riggs, she's a Bob Jones graduate, solid Christian conservative. I think LaDonna and I were the only pair, male-female pair in any state who were actually elected by their own delegation, then forced off by the consultants. And like I said, it's real weedy. It's probably water under the bridge, but I do think it's a discussion for the future. And I think what you'll see is a lot of these consultants, they're going to come around, they're going to realize they need the Christian right and the evangelicals, and there'll be a lot of conversations going forward. But the heavy-handedness was something I know that Barton wrote about it in the Blaze. Tony Perkins issued statements about it. My statement, what I focused on was, we've registered 2 million new Christian voters. I don't expect the media or the consultants or the political class to understand that. But, my goal now, I want to register 10 million new Christian voters in these next few cycles to show some of these people that don't have a regard for the Christian vote, who take us for granted, who don't mind rolling over us and backing up, hitting us again, that we're out there and we're forced to be reckoned with. And so my goals just got elevated. My resolve just got deepened. My determination just got strengthened by watching the kind of stuff that's gone on to show these people, they can't access that non-voting Christian in the pews, Richard. They can't. They believe they can, and this is left and right, by the way. This is left and right. They believe they can do it through digital ads and TV ads, which just get lost in the wash. People don't pay attention. My entire model came from sitting in rooms with political consultants on the side that I've been involved in, obviously, and watching them take the Christian vote for granted and watching them talk bad about us. Filthy, awful, awful. And, who's got the Christians with a lot of adjectives in there. And when I left the RNC to start Faith Wins, I determined we're going to make this about Jesus and about faith and about Christianity first. We're not going to be part of a political party. We're going to look at issues and focus on that. But I want not just votes, but voices to be heard and felt. They're going to feel our voices. And like I said, it's not just about the big elections. Let's face it, presidential sweepstakes and elections draw a lot of attention. So you can have bigger meetings because people are paying attention. But I want this for school boards and city councils and state legislatures. We need more Christian influence. I did a podcast and I talked about, people say, oh, politics is dirty business. Yes. It absolutely is. And I formed Faith Wins, God thing completely, driving along at night, called it that. Faith Wins. The Lord gave that to me, no doubt, one night, driving, praying, and was to increase and maximize the Christian influence in the public arena. There's not like it's too much of it. And so my frustration over exactly what you're talking about is why we started Faith Wins, 100%.
A lot of Christians will vote in presidential elections and then they turn the lights off for another 4 years and they don't do anything else except maybe occasionally watch Fox News or something like that. But if we're gonna influence things, in this country, we've got to do a whole lot more than just vote once every 4 years. How do believers get? How can we become the ones that are doing things like dictating what's in the platform, dictating who the cabinet appointees are and the political appointees and this kind of thing, that where policy really gets implemented and Christian values get established?
You're so right. Jerry Falwell said in the 90s, I read his book, and his pattern of building Thomas Road, knocking on doors, relationship-based, was really how I built GOP Faith and how I built my South Carolina team and now Faith Wins. But he had a great quote, Richard. He said, our problem as Christians, when we win, we quit, we lose, we quit, and we got to quit quitting. And so, yeah, I think if we would get involved at the granular level, I call it run up the score. And so we look at areas like states and counties and precincts. And I tell people, what if we ran up the score in that state house race or that county council race or that congressional race? And what if we just offer every candidate, all of them that want to come, we're going to do meetings with you and let you talk straight to pastors. But you know what they also got to do? They got to listen to pastors. I think that's where it's at. And then when pastors start assuming all my people are already voting, they're engaged. No, they're not. Richard, we're doing poll watcher recruitment in a bunch of states that pastors are concerned about the viability of elections. You know, my time machine doesn't work. I can't go fix the past, but I can work on the future. And I can put Christian eyeballs on the process. And I'm telling you, these pastors, they are fired up. I don't want people to discount. There's an awakening going on in our country among pastors. It happens to me every week. When a pastor says, I never did this before, my text is full of them right now. You know, I want to get involved. How do I help? And so we're recruiting people in churches to be poll watchers. We put them into a process. We're not trying to do the training, but we get them to somebody who's qualified to do the training, to give them their certifications, whatever's needed based on the difference in the states. And you know what that does? That gives us a chance to also talk about voter registration. It gives us a chance to reach that 10, 20, 30, 50% sitting in a church that the pastor is assuming they're voting, and they're not. So we need to be voting every time the polls are open. We need to stop watching TV and complaining. We need to engage. You know, you need to go to your precinct meeting and your county party meetings. You need to get involved at the state. I was with a buddy last night. How do I become a delegate like you were and sat on the floor? I saw your pictures on Facebook. I said, I can teach you how. And we'll do all that next year because that'll all get started and reinstituted next year in every state. We need to do that at the granular level as Christians. And maybe they're aligning with a different political party than me. That's okay. Let them go do that part. I think they're going to figure that out on their own based on the issues. But we can help them go get involved and see how they engage at that level. And I think Christians need to. Yeah.
So John Q. Christian's watching this show right now, Chad, and he's like, precinct? What are you talking about? You know, what? What's the first step?
Don't be surprised. Most of the consultants that inhabit the hallowed halls have never done that stuff. You know, every state party has county parties. Your county parties are organized at the precinct level. In South Carolina, I think there are 2,543 precincts. I don't know the Colorado number, but you can find out, and it's based on where you vote. And so it's organized if people know where they vote, and we've got all these lists on faithwins.org. They can go find that out. They can find out where their Democrat county party is held, where their Republican county party is held. I would highly recommend Christians go sit in both and make their decision that way. And then decide the one that most closely aligns with my worldview. I want to be involved. And they'd be surprised. It's almost like, hey, Richard Harris is still here. Let's make him chairman. Because
that's how it works, right?
You know this, every group's looking for leadership. I don't care who they are. It's the deacons, it's the elders, it's the Kiwanis, it's the JCs, it's every group's looking for leadership. And people ought to be involved where they feel called to be involved. Number one, we ought to all be involved in our local church. We ought to tithe and be involved. We ought to be involved in our community. This is a great way to be involved in the community.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Chad, obviously one of the biggest events in our lifetime happened, a few days ago when that young man shot Donald Trump. And thank you, Lord Jesus, for that bullet missed. I honestly believe that, an angel of the Lord or something nudged Donald Trump's head at the exact right moment and spared his life. For the goodness, for God's plan for this country. But, since then, everybody, left and right, is going, how did that guy get in that position and how was he allowed to take that shot? 150 yards at the longest is all he was. He didn't even need a scope on that rifle. If he was a decent marksman, he could have killed him. And now it's come out, all the failures of Secret Service. the right-wing blogosphere and everything is kind of ablaze with ideas that this was an inside job of complicit federal governments. Just wondering if you could comment and share your perspective on all this. You've been around politics for a long time. What's the significance of it? Do you suspect there was maybe a willful, I don't want to say involvement, but is it possible that the leftists in control of the federal government intentionally deprived Trump of the assets that were necessary to keep him safe? What are your thoughts?
I don't know, man. Look, the more eyewitnesses, the more videos that are published, the more questions you have. A massive security failure without question. I'm glad the Secret Service director resigned, but to me, a lot of more heads need to roll over this thing. Only God, only the Lord spared Trump's life. And I don't know if people are watching, they have to acknowledge he was moved. He was humbled. Just a couple days later, to go into a convention, I don't know if you watched it, but boy, he did not have, and I'm not against women serving, but that little girl trying to shield him when he's, 6'4", she might have been 5'5", 5'6", on stilettos, and her trying to shield him, bless her heart, and she put her body in harm's way. But to me, that was one of the typifying pictures of somebody's messed up. And when he came in the convention floor, I was 50, 60 feet away. There were some big old strapping boys that I think would be accused of toxic masculinity in the leftist media vernacular, and there were a bunch of them. There were more guarding him inside a secure zone at the convention than there were in that field in Butler, Pennsylvania. So a lot of questions. Look what's happened to the guy. You got to feel like God's hands on him. I mean, they lied about him in the media for years, made stuff up, the whole lawfare thing, nothing stuck. I think, a pastor told me the other day, goodness, I like Trump more now, watching that nothing they've accused him of has been accurate. And then they try to take him out. Somebody tries to take him out. Who knows what it is, but you got to think God's got his hand on the guy in some way, shape, or form. And he was moved by it. I'll say that he was moved by it. I'm glad we're going to get to the bottom of it. We need to get to the bottom of it. America should not be a country that has to have their dignitaries assaulted that way and being given access that way. Like I said, just hearing the news about the Israeli Watergate Hotel today, where pro-Hamas people released maggots into the hotel rooms and into the hotel, into the meeting areas. So those are security failures. They're not lapses. And the Secret Service has to get it right every single time. This shouldn't be America. And it ought to raise a lot of questions. It ought to make a lot of people evaluate every aspect of this. And I believe we'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And what do you think about the rhetoric, Chad, that's been going on now? It's not just since 2016. It's been going on for years. I remember back when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, or maybe it was his first time. He's running against Bob Dole. And I remember watching the presidential debates and how Clinton very strategically and intentionally would not refer to Bob Dole as senator, but kept calling him Bob. And meanwhile, Bob Dole's playing by the old-fashioned rules and kept calling him Governor Clinton. And I thought, something about this is wrong. And it seems like ever since then that the rhetoric has been ratcheting up and up. You remember during the first Iraq War, the leftist mob started calling General Petraeus, General Betray Us, and on it goes. Bush lied, and ratchet. You remember that comedian, that redheaded fanatic who held up a bloody head of Donald Trump? These things have consequences, don't they? And what can we do as Americans and especially as Christians to help set an example in this arena?
Well, I'm like you. I've been concerned about this for a long time. Michael Moore suggested Bush should be assassinated for the Iraq War. Remember that? That was early 2000s, and it's progressively gotten worse. The ladies on The View say awful things about people on the right. It's just unconscionable. And when Biden himself talks about Trump as Hitler and the people that follow him, and that kind of rhetoric does have consequences. It's got to be ratcheted down, and Christians, we got to be praying about it, right? We got to be praying about it. We also got to pray for a healing and a divide. I'm praying specifically myself that this happened to President Trump makes him want to be a healer and a mender, and for him to set the tone. And
Amen.
for people to realize how close we came to just an absolute powder keg exploding in our nation. Can you imagine if we'd have lost a presidential nominee in this polarized world we live in right now? I believe God protected us, Richard. And maybe for us, it shows us more than ever, God's not done with us. He's not done with you, me, y'all's ministry, mine, our churches, America. He doesn't need any of that. God's going to do what he needs to do and what he wants to do and fulfill his plan and purposes. But we're here, and he's tapped us on the shoulder. It's your turn to fix this stuff. So we got to be a part of ratcheting that down. I'm praying for a healing in our nation, a unification. And you're never going to unify with people who put maggots in a hotel room or take shots at presidential candidates. That's so far beyond the pale. But it starts with the messaging and the rhetoric. And we got to talk about issues. I've said this 5 or 6 times here, and I try to do it every time. We focus pastors on issues. I don't want them to get lost in the weeds on anything, whether it's the platform stuff or assassination attempts or lawfare. I want to stay focused on the issues. And Jesus isn't running. So we're always picking that candidate at every level that most closely identifies with a biblical worldview. And you know what that does? That puts a responsibility on me and you and the people we're talking to get educated. We've all got to get educated. We got to find out. We got to tone down the rhetoric and stay focused. And in Faith Wins, we're focused on registering 10 million Christians to influence and engage this culture in America. I think God expects it of us.
Yeah, man, well said, well said. So a lot of times pastors will react to rhetoric, political rhetoric, and say, that's why I don't get involved. It's because I don't want to offend anybody. And, but that's not the right answer, is it? The Bible says to speak the truth in love. Let your speech be seasoned with salt, and all these other commandments. Jesus never shied away from speaking the truth. But that's the line. We love our enemies, and to love people, you got to speak the truth.
That's exactly right. I tell my Sunday school class the same thing all the time. We have a higher standard we have to meet. We're believers. We believe Jesus died for us, and he died for everybody, not for me and just for you, but for people that we don't agree with. In fact, we might dislike them pretty heavily based on what they say. But we've got to be able to draw out, and we got to stand for truth. We got to have a spine and a backbone. We got to deliver that in love. We also got to recognize some people aren't going to receive it. That's not our goal to win them all over. We're to plant the seeds. Somebody may water it. Somebody else may get the harvest. And we also got to realize some aren't going to receive it, Richard. And but we have to stand for truth. I believe all this stuff going on, if this doesn't motivate the lazy, the complacent, the one that doesn't want to get involved, how about the children? How about the prayer life? How about the religious freedom? How about all these things that should matter, every one of us that's the believers? Now ought to be the time. Like I said, I started with this, and I'll end with this. Everything we care about is at stake. Not just this election, but especially this election, but every single election. Christians need to be involved. They need to be heard. They need to be felt by both parties, by everybody across the country, and Christian voices need to be heard at the city, the local, the state, and the federal levels.
Yeah, amen, amen. Everything is still on the line, and folks shouldn't be hoodwinked or deceived into thinking that Kamala Harris is somehow going to be better than Joe Biden. She may not be senile yet, but her belief system and policies are just as ungodly. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, you don't have to look very far. When people are abortion on demand, even after birth, they're okay with people deciding, I don't want that kid. That's just unbelievable. When they embrace the sexualization of children, when they embrace sexual mutilation, genital mutilation, puberty blockers, that's what the left's embraced. And then the anti-Israel rhetoric is so awful. It's so hateful. It's so dangerous. Embracing our enemies. It's crazy. But then you go back even to the border, Richard, which I think is a huge issue for people. The inflation, the grocery prices, the gas prices, the border insecurity, the open border. I had an Israeli speaker speak at a pastor meeting a few months ago, and he said, if you people in America think that you won't have 50 October 7ths on the same day, you've let them in. We have no idea who's in our nation. So our guard needs to be up. We need to be prayed up. We need to be fully engaged, and we need to get informed. And I'm really proud of you guys, what you and Brother Andrew have done with your podcast, with your education, with your conferences. Dana and I were blessed just being there, sitting there, hanging out with y'all. We got replenished and refueled, and we're ready for the fight. And we're in this thing through November and beyond. Faith Wins is going to be engaged, brother.
Well, thank you, Chad. You're an inspiration too. We're out of time for today, but I do want to encourage everybody to go to Chad's website, Faith Wins. Check out all of their amazing resources. You can send folks there, your friends and family, get your friends and family registered, get your church registered to vote, and do your part to get involved. We're going to win this thing in November, I believe with all my heart, but it's up to us. So, Chad, thanks for coming on the show. Love you, man. Can't wait to see you again.
Love you, brother.
God bless you.
Thank you for joining today's Truth and Liberty livecast. You can watch today's and past livecasts in our archives at truthandliberty.net. Our goal is to educate Christians and connect them with resources and organizations to help them impact their sphere of influence. You can help us accomplish this by making a donation at truthandliberty.net/donate. Join us next time for more Truth and Liberty.